Well, hey guys, I gotta tell you, this one's really been bothering me. Um, I got a comment recently on one of my videos, and I know it was facetious. Well, let's presume it wasn't for a second. Let's presume this person was putting this comment on one of my videos in earnest. But I think we can probably understand some of the tone in which it was said. Well, it's just been really getting to me because under the surface of this brazen comment is really a way that a lot of people think. A lot of people have a set of lies related to this kind of comment that I think we should deal with. Like, I think we should care about. I think we should clean up. So, we're going to spend a little bit of time on this. And here's how the comment went. The guy said, a guy or gal, I guess I don't really know, said, pastor counseling married couple. Pastor to husband, when did you start looking at porn? Husband, when my wife kept rejecting me. And that's the whole comment. The idea being, of course, that the rejection that he kept experiencing from his wife led him to porn. Now let's take a second and treat this honestly and say that is a reason that guys can turn to porn. Now let me be clear. I don't think it's a good reason. I don't think that guys should do that, and I don't think they should engage with porn at any level. But it is true that there are many final steps between people and pornography. There are many roads that lead to that, and if a wife is doing this thing where she keeps rejecting her husband, maybe there's a bunch of confusion there. Maybe there's a bunch of stuff he doesn't understand, she doesn't understand. Maybe they're not communicating well. Maybe they're having a really hard time in their marriage and they're really angry at one another. Maybe they've had an intense circumstance happen and a bunch of old traumatic things are being drummed up. There's a lot of possibilities. And so I want to be honest and admit that on some level it does track that out of rejection could come this kind of a response. But behind that, don't we think that this might be suggesting that somehow his wife was responsible for him turning to pornography? So let's talk about that for a minute. Wives, I want to talk to you for a moment. I want to encourage you. As a former addict, I want to say this, and just hopefully to build you up in the Lord. I want to give you 3 encouragements on this kind of thinking. If you are a wife who has experienced a husband with this kind of thinking, 3 encouragements for you. The first one is very simply that it is not your job to manage your husband's sin. Now, this is one of those things scripturally that I think a lot of people kind of get backwards. And it has to do with the way we think about biblical unity and kind of like how we draw party lines, right? We think, okay, if I'm married to this person, then my complete and utter devotion and defense needs to go to them. And on one level, that's true, in the sense that we are totally devoted to them. But what happens when the act of protecting them is actually less devoted to them than the act of not protecting them, the act of allowing them to deal with their own sin? What about the act of taking responsibility, particularly over the sin itself? Let me put it this way. There's a story in David's life where he gets really mad. He asks somebody for some help. The guy rejects him, and David comes in. He's about to slaughter the guy, and before he gets there, the man's wife comes out and stops David's caravan and provides him all sorts of like resources and such. And David commends her for being wise and for dealing well with David. But this story is not about this woman taking responsibility for her husband's sin. Instead, it's her taking responsibility for herself. It's her stepping out in wisdom and protecting her servants and protecting her responsibilities, and in some sense mitigating the damage of her husband's sin, but not taking on her husband's sin. You'll notice she didn't take him by the scruff of the neck and walk him out and be like, now you got to do this. She didn't say, beat me instead, right? Kill me instead of my husband, this sort of thing. No, what she did was she took responsibility over what she already had dominion over. Now, that can be a really tough line to draw and a really hard thing to see. But I want to just encourage you that if you feel burdened by your husband's sin, particularly an addictive kind of sin, something he won't get away from, a lifestyle of sin, if you're feeling burdened by that, it's time to seek help and support and encouragement. I'm not going to jump straight to it's time to leave. I don't think that. I think it's time to get more help. And another encouragement coming, we'll explain that further. The second one I want to say is directly connected to that. You're not alone. You're not alone. There's a community for you. And you are enough on your own. Your connection with your husband is not something that makes you worthless if you leave it. You are two beautifully created people, fearfully and wonderfully made in God, by God, to come together and create this Trinitarian type unity. But if your husband is breaking that unity, that doesn't mean that you suddenly become worthless. No, certainly you feel the effects of his sin. That's how sin works. When people sin, consequences flow out from that. But that doesn't mean you're not valuable and beautiful and image-bearing all on your own. That doesn't mean God doesn't have a purpose for you or this sort of thing. So I just want to encourage you that while we're not talking about just throwing your husband to the wild or this sort of thing, what we are suggesting is that you in and of yourself are valuable, which is fantastic. And I hope you take refuge in that. In taking refuge in that, you will find yourself taking refuge in God. And that is the appropriate place for our value to fall, in reference to God and not in reference to our husband, our marriage, or these kind of under God structures. The last thing I want to encourage you with is this. It is okay to let him feel the consequences of his sin. Now, I say this because there's really only two kinds of pain. There's pain that comes from consequences, and then pain of personal conviction. And a husband who is using this kind of reasoning about his porn addiction, he's relieved himself of personal conviction. For whatever reason, he's living in denial. He's living in a really bad place. And so I want to encourage you to allow him to experience the hurt of what he's doing. If your husband is engaging with pornography, you do not have to feel responsible for being intimate with him or close to him because he is unsafe for you. His addiction should cause consequences, and that should be in your relationship with him. Now, I want to be clear. I think it's really important that you talk with some people, that you engage with some people, that you don't just start throwing around decisions because you're hurt. And in our hurt, we often make really bad decisions. We need sounding boards. We need the church. We need our community, people who love us to come in and take care of us in these moments. But it's okay for your husband to feel the consequence of his sin. The product of his sin and the consequence in your relationship and in the other relationships that he's bound to harm through these kinds of behaviors. Those consequences need to be able to come to the forefront so that that pain can motivate him to get up and over his denial and finally come into healing. You see, by protecting him from his own consequences, ultimately we are not allowing the benefit of pain. The benefit of pain is that it drives us into a place of clarity to see our sin for what it is. And so long as we protect that, addicts can't see what's going on. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that's all on you either. You can only do your part of that. But I want to just encourage you that consequence can be a very good thing. Okay. Lastly, in this video, I want to take just a minute and talk about 3 reasons why this comment is really off from a perspective of an addicted husband. So if a husband is saying that his wife keeps rejecting him, my wife keeps rejecting me, so I look at porn, because I need to get mine, right? Or this sort of thing. The first problem is that he's blaming someone else for his own choices. He's obfuscating, can't think of that word. He's giving away his responsibility to these choices. But the fact is, no one is putting a gun to his head and making him look at pornography. He is choosing to do that as a response to this situation. Maybe he couldn't choose his circumstance, but he certainly could choose the way that he responded to it. So blaming his wife for his own behaviors is categorically wrong. This man needs to grow up and take responsibility over his own actions. The second thing that's revealed here is that this man is codependent on his wife. He has a dependency on his wife that goes beyond what should be hers to control. He has made his identity a part of her relationship with him in an unhealthy way. One of the things I like to talk about every once in a while in sessions is something that I call codependency creep. And what that is if you imagine a relationship on a line, and half of that is his responsibility and the other half of that is her responsibility, and right in the middle is where that crosses over. You can imagine a situation where someone might take 55% of the responsibility for the relationship for a time or during a circumstance. Maybe she's going through something really hard. Maybe he had a death in the family. Maybe there's some sort of area where we can really be there for one another and cross over into each other's relational territory. But as soon as someone sees that crossing over as a right instead of a gift, they have become codependent on that. So the husband here is seeing his sexual engagement with his wife as a right and not as a gift. But sex is a gift from a husband to a wife, from a wife to a husband. It's an incredibly intimate act that is to be given freely and is under our own purview to participate in. If he's gleaning value from this idea that he will receive this as a right, and he has entered into codependency, an unhealthy relationship with his wife. And that is a great bridge into the last thing I want to say. This man may think that he is, let's say, in authority over his wife. But ironically, he's revealing that he has made an idol out of his wife. Think about what he's saying. When did you start looking at porn? When my wife kept rejecting me. So you're saying that without the value that comes from your wife, you are nothing? So you're turning her into the arbiter of value? That's an idol. That thing I do or must receive in order to feel valuable, that is an idol. It's ironic to me how a lot of times people that are most angry at their spouses are actually the most invested in their spouses. And in this case, it could very much be the case where this guy is looking to his wife to solve his problems. And at the end of the day, that makes her an idol in his life. And he is falling prey to her control in some sense. So there's a whole lot wrong with this kind of thinking. Absolutely. And if you are a wife who's dealing with this kind of a thinking, I'd love to chat. Feel free to contact me and we'll engage. If you're a husband who has this kind of thinking, let's talk. Let's engage. If you feel like this might triggered something in your mind and gotten the gears going, please let's talk. And if you want to see more content like this, please like and subscribe and all that stuff. And I look forward to bringing more of it. And until next time, you're loved.